What's up everyone, it's Endymion, and it's been a while since I've delved into something like this. In this video, I'll be covering how one director demands you watch her film because it's about black people, and if you don't, you're now racist. And a few more stories ranging from publications cherry-picking stories as long as they fulfill diversity quotas. And how across the pond British television programs are trying to reprogram children into believing a very concerning push for revisionist history. And the final story will be about how Jay-Z is pushing a movie that reimagines Jesus Christ as a black man, and race swaps the entirety of Jerusalem with black people. You'll see what I mean, it's crazy. As for footage, you probably don't want to stare at still images too long, so I'll use a lot of historical video game footage, and anything that I enjoy that also has diversity in it that's actually not ridiculous or stupid. Anyway, there's a lot, so let's begin. Firstly, let's look at this article from Bounding Into Comics titled, Ava Duvernay says racism and sexism to blame for audiences being more excited about Oppenheimer than her Isabel Wilkerson biopic origin. If the name Ava Duvernay doesn't ring a bell, I wouldn't blame you. This writer-director has been a part of various projects in the past few years that have either bombed or never came to fruition, like New Gods. One of her massive bombs was A Wrinkle in Time, which starred Oprah and people like Mindy Kaling. You know, the lady who self-inserted herself into Scooby-Doo and ruined it. That film was a box office disaster, and she was also responsible for getting another show off the ground called Naomi that you likely never heard of. That CW show is about a DC Comics character named Naomi McDuffie. She's basically the first child born of two metahumans from an alternate universe, and she's sent to the main universe and becomes a superhero that can fly and shoot laser beams. Game Rant even had a delusional article about Naomi's cancellation, citing how even though the show was dropped a mere year after its release and cancelled, that its legacy would last. And since I know you probably didn't even know this show existed, here's a clip of Naomi flying in it.
CW's ass, man!
Yeah, I can't imagine why the CW canceled a show where they made the flying look that bad. In Game Rant's same article, they cite a tweet where a user makes a connection on how a ton of shows on the CW were canceled, and how all the canceled shows had either queer or people of color in leading roles. As if the reason why shows like Batwoman were cancelled because of having a black leading actress, and not how the show alienated DC fans and pushed an agenda about how Batwoman was better than Batman in every conceivable way. Even though the only reason she has a batsuit, vehicles, gadgets, and really anything she would actually need to fight crime was not developed by her or designed with her own resources. But instead, everything she owns and uses is instead just seized from Batman and repurposed to fit her own agenda. Which, honestly, when you look at it that way, Batwoman was a shining example of why things like this get cancelled to begin with. But anyway, now that you know who this lady is, let's get to the point now. Ava Duvernay has a new movie coming out called Origin, which is about the life of Isabel Wilkerson. Isabel is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist who's written books like The Warmth of Other Suns, which was pushed by many mainstream outlets, and it tells the story of black people in America. Notice how I didn't describe Isabel as a black journalist, but simply by her job title. Because unlike the majority of Hollywood that's obsessed with woke identity politics, I think people should be judged on their character and not the color of their skin. But Ava Duvernay doesn't think that way because of course she does. Ava was then asked, what does it take to get the audience to watch a movie like Origin? And here's where the victim mindset that is all too common these days rears its ugly head. Ava Duvernay then blames that her new film Origin might fail at the box office simply because audiences are too racist and bigoted these days, because of course that's what she thinks. This is what she said, and I quote, "You're right, it's challenging to watch a process film about a man making a bomb. He's a man who was trying to do something and couldn't quite describe it to anyone else. But he knew it. Isabel is a woman who knows something and can't quite describe it, but she knows it and she's gonna find it. You'll sit through 3 hours of his process. Will you sit through 2 hours of her process? I think that is the only proposition. It's not talking about the merit of the films. It's talking about the very idea of following a woman through an intellectual process, an intellectual exercise. Then you make that a black person, then you make that a black woman. Is it valid enough for you to go on that journey with her?" End quote. Immediately upon reading this, it made me have Vietnam flashbacks to things like Netflix's Cleopatra, and the myriad of diversity-led projects failing and then blaming everyone but themselves. Just the way it's framed is designed to instill regret in the listener, saying things like, "Is it valid enough for you to go on that journey with her? You sat through 3 hours of Oppenheimer's process, will you do the same for Wilkinson?" The problem here, which is honestly why this video exists to begin with, is that let's cut to the chase and not sugarcoat it. Likely, if this origin movie ends up in theaters and not on some streaming service immediately, it will probably bomb. It's not because audiences are racist, but you really can't compare the works of a journalist, regardless of their race, to the guy who literally created the weapon that could erase humanity off the planet. Plus, whether people want to admit it or not, it's not about this being diversity-led. But a large part of people going out to see movies comes down to something that is common sense, which is the director and their filmography. Look, I saw Oppenheimer. I wasn't crazy about it myself, mostly because I'm an old man whose brain needs stimulation to stay awake. But I didn't see Oppenheimer because of its subject matter. I saw it because it was a Christopher Nolan movie. He's proven in the past that his films are spectacles, things you want to see on IMAX because of how he frames his movies. The Dark Knight or stuff like Inception or Interstellar were all wild experiences in theaters. He also never uses identity politics or victim shaming to get people to watch his movies. Another director I really like is Denis Villeneuve, whose name I never know if I'm properly saying. But like Nolan, I watch whatever he makes, and to be real with you, oftentimes Denis makes movies about stuff I have zero knowledge on either. Arrival is based on a book that I never read, but damn was that a great movie. Same goes for Dune. Frankly, I didn't grow up with Dune. I don't know much about it besides there being spice for space travel, things like big worms, and the movie starring a guy named Paul of all things. Yet I watched it because Denis directed the movie, and I knew even though I have no idea what it's about, I'm gonna see it because he directed it. When it comes to Ava Duvernay or other creators like Jada Smith who tried to convince the world Cleopatra was black, unfortunately for them, they don't have projects that general audiences are familiar with or exist in good faith. And the ones they do bomb and fail, like A Wrinkle in Time or Naomi. Then if you add your nonsense identity politics victim blaming mindset on top, that's basically poison to the average customer. Why would I want to watch your movie about a journalist when the only reason you tell me I should watch it is to prove I'm not racist? And my counter is, why would I watch something from someone who in the past clearly thinks I'm a bigot without knowing anything about me, except judging me based on the color of my skin? Ava Duvernay is one of the countless modern day creators who parrot the woke agenda and demands you watch what they make simply because of the very real victim mindset they've become accustomed to. I'm not going to watch, listen, play, or engage with anything if the core selling point is to prove to people I don't know that I'm not racist. Why don't you just make a good product, stop victim blaming people, and see how that goes for you? But that's why these things fail so often, and it's not surprising. And I always roll my eyes when people try to use race as to why things fail. As if because I'm a white man, I can't connect with someone who doesn't look like me, apparently. Yet characters like Spawn, for example, is someone I've loved since I was literally 5 years old, reading and playing with toys from that franchise. And even recently, in games like Baldur's Gate, I find Will to be one of the best party members. I don't look like Will, but I enjoy his character, story, and themes because he's not written where his main character archetype is his skin color, but instead his charisma, heroics, and dark ability to wield eldritch dark magic is instead what defines him. Will is also directly related to the origins of Baldur's Gate as a city, and he came from a privileged life. And yet he rejected the silk cloths and pampered future and became a hero of the downtrodden. That's an awesome character. Yeah, sure, he's also a black guy, but he's also way more than the color of his skin. That's what people want in their characters today. We don't care what color their skin is or if they're a woman or not, as long as they're well-written characters. I love Lae'zel in Baldur's Gate 3. I actually chose her as my romance option. The woman is a goddamn bloodthirsty warrior who, I'm not kidding, in order to win her love, you have to face her in Mortal Kombat and fight her to the brink of death to prove you're worthy of her. She's a psycho, but knowing me, that's probably why I like her so much. But enough about me, and what about imminent releases like Cyberpunk Phantom Liberty, where Idris Elba stars as one of the core characters of that expansion? I'm hyped to play it and see what Idris's character is all about within the confines of cyberpunk. I don't care that Idris is black, because I think his character will be more than that. So clearly the issue here is not black people being underrepresented in media or audiences being racist. And can I not like cyberpunk as a world because the guy who made it, whose name is Mike Pondsmith, is black? Am I not allowed to enjoy things unless the people who make them look 100% like me? Like, that's insane. But it's instead the people who make these things like Ava Duvernay not being able to see anyone for anything besides the color of their skin. And if you ask me, that's more racist than anything. Our next story is also from Bounding Into Comics and further solidifies what I've been saying this entire time. That article is titled, UK publishers and literary agents reportedly uninterested in working with white or straight writers. People of color, queer, and minority groups are always the most welcome. This story basically further shows how the institutions of our modern day society are becoming more racist than ever before without even realizing it. Various British publishers are openly demanding for more literary works to be published by people who are simply not white. Let's read what one of these publishers want here in their letter. We are looking for extraordinary stories for children that reflect and celebrate the diversity of our world. We are actively seeking voices that have historically been underrepresented, particularly with tropes that are often said to be overdone. For example, we are not interested in stories about white, able-bodied World War II evacuees, but would welcome that story from a disabled, LGBTQ+ or person of color perspective. If your book is about an identity that is not yours, we will not be a good fit. This includes books based on the experiences of family members and friends. Wow, dude, imagine being this openly racist and it being fine. So these publishers are not interested in any story about anyone white or white in passing, basically. So if I wrote a story about my grandfather surviving Nazi Germany and seeing his family getting slaughtered while he stood there powerless, my story would be thrown into the garbage simply because of my skin color. You can't see my face right now, dear viewer, but I am very visibly full of anger at the thought of how blatantly biased our world is becoming. But I guess if I ever did want to write a story about my grandfather's experiences in World War II, I'll just make him black, put him in a wheelchair for disabled brownie points, make sure he's missing one of his feet, has pink hair, and a Black Lives Matter tattoo strewn across his chest for good measure. Maybe then these publications would want to hear that story. But it's insane, because these publications openly state the focus is to represent misrepresented writers. But let's be real. That's all Hollywood and these publications have been doing for years now. This is unironically the reverse of a scene in Ava DuVernay's movie Origin, where the young black kid sits outside of the whites-only pool. But now the pool is only for people who shill woke identity politics, and instead it's anyone who doesn't fit these rigid constraints that's left outside. If you wanted to represent underrepresented writers, you would represent white people then as well, since they're being racially profiled. Instead, what publications, Hollywood, and more should be doing is representing good stories and competent writers. But if they did that, they wouldn't be able to overload their quotas and meet ESG score requirements. Finally, there's this video going around on Twitter showing how the British Broadcasting Corporation, or BBC, are pushing revisionist history on children. Sadly, I don't know if I can even show the majority of this clip without fear of copyright, but here's a few seconds. I'll link the full clip in the description box below if you'd like to watch it yourself. But the gist of this clip is a part of an ever-growing cultural revisionism being pushed to rewrite history. They did the same thing with Cleopatra. Hell, even Anne Boleyn was depicted as a black woman. The literal Queen of England hundreds of years ago, dude. You can't make this up. Now the BBC is claiming original British people were also black instead of white. And the reality is that we know these moves are likely being pushed by woke white people in positions of power too. And they're not even doing this because they believe it. They're just doing it because their shareholders and investors need their companies to bend the knee enough to fulfill that sweet ESG score criteria. This is like if the country of Ghana, which is in West Africa, decided to release a video with a white guy singing while playing dress up, claiming, hey, actually the first Ghanaians were white people. Or they could even put a Chinese person in costume and have them wiggle around on a green screen for more brownie points. These things are being done to revise the historical legitimacy of our world, and it's simply being done for corporate gain while brainwashing young people into believing false truths. Finally, let's look at the story titled Blasphemous, the Book of Clarence film backed by rapper Jay-Z pushes Black Hebrew Israelites propaganda with race-swapped Jerusalem. You can't make this up. I had to go watch the trailer of this movie to ensure I wasn't being trolled, and by God, it's real. The film pushes a narrative that Hebrew Israelites were actually black all along, and that white people are to blame for rewriting this history apparently. Jay-Z also says his time working with the director of the film, whose name is James Samuel, was amazing, and that James is not afraid to think big about things that put us as a people in places where we were erased. We didn't exist in Western times, we all know that's false, and we didn't exist in biblical times, history would say otherwise. Like, dude, what do you even want me to say about this story? This is the epitome of giving people an inch and them taking the whole damn stadium. First, Cleopatra is black, then Britain was founded by black people. Now black people apparently also founded Jerusalem? If these things were true, which they aren't, but if they were, then where the hell did every other kind of person come from then? Did Jewish, British, Egyptian people just suddenly appear out of nowhere and erase this so-called black dynasty that apparently existed all along? Were they sent by aliens to destroy black people? Actually, I shouldn't say that because these Hollywood types are delusional enough to believe that. The movie is about a guy named Clarence who mimics Jesus Christ and tries to become like him. He even gains followers too. And there's a shot in the trailer where Jesus Christ shows up being adorned by his followers. They block out his face on purpose, but one look at his hands tells you that this movie is pushing that Jesus was also black. Allegedly, characters like John the Baptist are race-swapped as well, and Mary Magdalene is apparently race-swapped too. This is the end point of this revisionist agenda. They want to effectively transform everything to fit their new waves of belief. If things like this keep getting normalized, eventually every single incredible moment in human history will be retrofitted, erased, and claimed by those who had nothing to do with them. Honestly, I still feel like I'm being trolled looking at this movie's trailer. I actually can't believe it even exists or got greenlit. And now some kid will watch this and believe they're actually Jewish or that Jesus was black, and that's the end goal. Brainwash the upcoming generations until these ideas become reality. And that is not only damaging, but by God is it a scary thought to think about. I guess what this video's message would be that I really hope whoever's watching this keeps their eyes open and minds clear of any of this propaganda, because that's what this all is ultimately. And we need to stop victim blaming customers into consuming content not by choice, but so that they can prove they're not racist. And it's crazy because with this woke revisionist agenda going global, if we did take what these publications said is true, then the message is that the entire planet, from the lands of China to the Swiss Alps and the roaring jungles of South America, everything was controlled, cultivated, and created by only black people apparently. Everything except actual Africa, of course, which, come on, dude. I know these companies think the average person is stupid, but this is just beyond parody. I know the people watching this are not stupid. I know you're not actually consuming this stuff believing it to be gospel. And until things change back to where truth becomes more important than ESG and stories begin to be told because of their quality, instead of if the person who wrote it is in a wheelchair or has pink hair, and we instead see all people as human beings instead of as segregated colors, I'll keep pushing back. This woke nonsense cannot prevail, and I thank you for being here and hopefully understanding where I'm coming from with all of this. You are not racist if you do not consume these things. It just means you're a sensible, sane human being with a functioning brain on your shoulders. So thank you for watching, subscribe for more in the future, and like the video to help the channel out. Have a great day, question everything, and I will see you in the next one.